Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Uncharted The Lost Legacy crushing difficulty walkthrough. This is the third part of the game, and it is called Homecoming. This is another short mission, and it's going to be tasking us once again getting our hands on the necessary tools that we need to get through Uncharted in its current form, which is lots of rope swinging, lots of climbing, lots of little bits of dialogue, and then the introduction to the Jeep. Because after this particular mission, there's going to be one of the longest missions in the game, which opens up a lot and gives you a surprisingly large amount of things to do. For the purpose of this walkthrough, I'm going to be doing only the main things that's needed to progress the story, but there are plenty of side quests and distractions should you choose to partake in them. But leading up on this video, after we get into the Jeep and do a little bit of driving, we're going to be in the first real combat sequence of the game. There's a small one coming up, and then after that is the proper one, and I want to talk about the proper one because it's kind of the quintessential Uncharted encounter in Uncharted 4 and beyond. So they changed the way the games worked in a lot of ways, and they moved towards a much more progressive, much more wide-scale battle zones where cover isn't safe. There are plenty of different vantage points and avenues, lots of tiers, lots of flank routes, lots of grass, lots of opportunity, but also lots of moments where failure can occur. And you have a choice whether or not you want to use stealth or guns blazing or a combination of the two. And everything is effective in this game, but I feel like on Crushing that a lot of the stealth is more hard work than it's needed. You can stealth almost all of these moments if you want to, and you can have a lot of success with that, especially in this version, because in this version they've introduced this silenced pistol, which is definitely, I think, to try and help in some of those moments, and the fight coming up is no different. There is going to be access to a silenced suppressed pistol if you need it or you want to use it. I'm personally going to save it for a later encounter, but I am going to talk about one of the options that you can do, which is not what you're going to see in my video, but this is the first fight. So after you examine the door, you're going to do the tried and tested cable technique of opening things in Uncharted. It was a neat idea in Uncharted 4, and it's back in this one. It's not really an offensive mechanic, it's just kind of there, but the moment you hook it, you get attacked by these four dudes. So Nadine is going to be fighting the first few, and I'm going to be shooting the guys on the top. There's a couple more than I thought there were, so use your 1911 or your paratrooper or whatever they call it in this game, and there is our first epiphany of, you know, your Uncharted 4-ness, the grenades. So, for whatever reason, we do not have an option to chuck grenades back. Grenades are an interesting thing in Uncharted. In the first game, they were a separate weapon you had to swap to. In the high-definition remaster, they tweaked that so you could chuck them organically like the second and the third game. And then in the second game, I don't think you could throw them back, could you? But in the third game, you could. There was this little mini-game where you had to stop it at a certain timer and you could throw them back. And I thought that was perfect. It kind of worked really, really well. Well, they decided to not have that as be a thing in this game, and I can understand why they chose that for Uncharted 4, because of just how greedy the AI is at throwing grenades. As it stands, if you do not pop up and shoot at the AI, they will throw a grenade at you to make you move, and it works wonderfully to push you out of cover, which is the main reason they do this, and it's one of the main reasons that this game can be challenging. But there's no option to chuck it back, and if there was, you'd never have to move, because the AI is so greedy with grenades at chucking them at you. You could stay in one piece of cover and just chuck them all back and win, and it'd make every encounter very, very easy. So on one side of this, I'm kind of glad there's no option, but at the same time, there are moments where you need that tool. You're in cover, there's nothing you can do, you cannot move in that moment or you will die on Crushing, and it'd be great to just toss that back, but instead it leads to these moments where there's a grenade at your feet, you have to move, and you just have to pray. And it removes the skill from the player, and it puts it in the hand of luck. But here is the quintessential Uncharted 4 encounter. A very big area, lots of people in cover, lots of vantage points, lots of opportunities to do things. What do? Park the Jeep as far away from the guys as I can and shoot everybody at a distance. This is my method for doing this encounter, folks. This is actually one of the toughest fights in this entire game, because it has a lot of variables, and they can come at you from a lot of different angles. So all I'm going to do here is keep a defensive line between the car and between the rock here. The enemies are going to come on either the left or the right, and the only problem you're going to face in this position is not being able to see enemies through the grass. There is one part of Uncharted 4 and this game that I despise, and that is giving the enemy the ability to see through foliage, and the player obviously can't. So they have 100% advantage in any movement like this because they can see you and you can't see them. But in this game, you do not die as fast as you did in the 4th game, I don't believe, when it comes to crushing. It's been a while since I played it, so that might just be my memory failing me, but I feel like in this game you get a couple of extra tries than you normally would. I don't know if it's the aggression, I'm not entirely sure what it is, but this is definitely the easiest Uncharted campaign I've played. Because there's only 3 hard parts, and this ain't one of them. This is just a tricky fight. But, as I was saying before, if you want to take a stealth approach here, I recommend you loop round the right hand side, go to the waterfall, hack the lockpick the box, get the silenced pistol, and then proceed to shoot all the people who are in the towers. If you do it in the right sequence, you can do it so that they don't see the bodies of the other ones, and then you can kind of eliminate the guys patrolling on the ground. That being said, it took me about 40 minutes, guys, to do that, and when you have a sequence such as this, where you can do some methodical, meticulous method of stealth to get through it all, or you can spend 4 minutes shooting everybody, the strategy for a walkthrough that's best is going to be the loud one, because this took me 1 attempt and it took 4 minutes, whereas the stealth took a dozen attempts, took 40 minutes to map out a route, and at the end of the day it was easier to shoot my gun. So it's 100% up to you guys if you want to go through this mission in various ways. But the one thing that's very important right now is when you kill this last guy, be aware you're going to trigger a spawn by the waterfall behind the car where the silenced pistol is. Don't know why my mouth went weird then and I said that funny, but I did. And what's going to happen is you're going to hear them shout, you're going to hear them spawn, and when they do, you want to chuck 2 grenades at the waterfall to kill them as they land. This is the trigger for them coming in now. You'll get shot a little bit, chuck the grenades immediately. If you do this correctly, you can kill almost everybody as they land. But I end up fucking up and I have to chuck another grenade, and I think there's 1 guy gets away. But as long as you get rid of the main number of those enemies, you'll have no issue with the rest of this fight. But this piece of cover here is really good for 2 reasons. The first one is Chloe goes down really low to stay under it, and the second one is if anybody gets above you, you can blind fire them. So it does give you more safety than you would think. But that brings us to our companion. You spend this entire game with a companion, much like you have in previous Uncharted, and in this game, they're not the most effective, but they can kill people. The one area where they're fantastic is in close quarters. Because in this game, when the enemies get close to you, they have a fetish for trying to punch Chloe. They're all massive misogynists, all they want to do is hit women, and it actually helps. And you might think, well, how does that help? That sounds crazy. The guns hurt more than the fists. Fists will kill you in 2 to 3 punches depending on how clean they hit you. Guns up close do a lot more damage, it seems, especially if you get like the shotguns or something like that. So when they get close and they start punching you, it's best case scenario. And it works on a few levels here because your companion will get involved and save you a lot of the times, and they'll actually interrupt the enemies. So moments in previous Uncharted games where an enemy would be close to you and they just shoot you and you'd be dead, in this game they're fighting with your companion or they're trying to fight with you, and it always gives you an option to get out of the fights. There's only one enemy in the game where you can't get them off you instantly, and that's the grabby wankers that appear once later on. They might appear more than once, but there's one area I know they appear, which is the hardest part of the game in my opinion. But aside from that, that's pretty much all you really need to know. Everything that you learned and inherited from Uncharted 4 is going to work here. If you can do this fight, either way, stealth or by going loud, you will have no problem with 99% of this game. There are just 3 sequences, 2 of them are vehicle sections which are god-awful and poorly designed, and one of them is a very close-quartered fight where you do not start with a weapon and there is a lot of enemies and no checkpoint. They're the only hard parts I can see you struggling with. Everything else is very manageable. So if you've got to the other side of this encounter, you're good to go, you're going to get that trophy for beating Crushing, and yeah, it should be a good one. But now this is also an important moment. After every battle, you want to run around the battlefield and make sure you stock up on all the grenades you used, and make sure that you can get the most ammo in whatever gun you choose to use. Doesn't matter what gun it is, pick the gun you like, pick whichever one gives you the most bullets. The hardest part about crushing difficulty, aside from the whole host of issues with Uncharted 4, which I spoke about at length in that walkthrough, so if you're interested in those criticisms, check that out, is the ammo. Running out of ammo on this game is the most dangerous scenario ever, and it's something that should be avoided as much as possible, but unfortunately, sometimes you just can't help it. The second thing that I really get frustrated with in this game is that there's a lot of guns I like to use, but you're limited to only 2. And the problem with only having 2 guns is you have to pick the ones that you know are going to pay you the greatest dividends. So I get in situations where I get a full shotgun, and I want to use the shotgun because it's really fun to get close quarters and play dangerously, and then I find a China Lake. You cannot not pick up a grenade launcher if you find one, and it's one of those issues where modern gaming has really crippled some of the fun of video games, of having a ton of options and different choices, but all of this is considered in the game's balance, and it exists to make it more challenging than it necessarily would be if you had a couple of different guns. But don't worry guys, they compensate for that lack of challenge by making the most arbitrary vehicle encounters, which are so unimpressive, it's not even funny. It's just, like, visually they look amazing, the lighting's great, but mechanically, they're up there with bouncing on fucking Bowser 3 times. They're just terrible, dude. This is not the NES, this is not the 80s, guys. But thank you for watching, I hope the guide is helping, and you take care now.